Metrics marketing agencies should track to communicate their value. What's up, everybody? My name is Chris Hervochon. The website is betterwaycpa.com. And today I'm going to be talking to you as a marketing agency owner, how you can communicate the value that you're delivering to your clients, and then how you can turn that value into dollars for your agency. So the purpose of measuring value: measure things so your clients understand the value they're receiving, and so you can be adequately paid for the value you are delivering. Pretty simple, right? So marketing basically falls into this first pillar of business strategy out of the 4 pillars. And there's a playlist out there on my YouTube channel which goes through the 4 pillars. I'm not going to go through those today, but suffice it to say that marketing generally falls into the customer acquisition and sales bucket, or the customer acquisition and sales pillar of the 4 pillars of business strategy. It's all about driving brand awareness for your clients or for your business if you're an internal marketer, and then in turn driving revenue. Pretty simple. So as a marketing agency, where should you start as far as tracking metrics, building databases, and then taking that, turning it into information, and then delivering that to your client? Well, the first thing that you should do is develop an internal knowledge base of tactics that you've tested and tracked so that you can make reasonable assumptions on the value that you can deliver for a client or a potential client. So in other words, what you want to know is, I have done this, so I've done X, Y, and Z for clients in the past. It has turned into X, Y, and Z for those clients as a result of what the tactics that I've implemented. And you, as a new client, Mr. Customer, if I implement X, Y, and Z, I can reasonably expect that it's going to translate into something, right? So it's going to translate into a higher conversion rate by 5% or 10% or whatever, or just higher, okay? Or it's going to translate into a larger audience, or it's going to translate into more brand awareness. We want to be measuring all of these things, right? So this is why it's really important to niche. If you have this knowledge base of tactics that you have tested and that you've developed over time in your agency, likely those tactics are not going to apply the same across different businesses. So a tactic that you implemented for an accounting firm, such as myself, is not going to work the same as a tactic that you implemented for some sort of a manufacturing company. So if your marketing agency is only servicing accounting firms, you know what type of copy you need to write. You know what channels the accounting firms clients are most likely to frequent. You know demographic information. You know all of these things. So that's why it's important to niche. So when you say, hey, Mr. CPA firm, if I change this one thing on your website, it's likely to attract this many more customers, or it's likely to build your audience by this percentage over this period of time, then the client can start to figure out, well, okay, if my conversion rate's 50%, and if I'm going to get another 100 people visiting my website, these are just made up numbers, well, that's another 50 clients, and then each client is worth this to me. Then they understand the value that you're going to drive. So it's really important to have this knowledge base, this internal knowledge base. This is for you. This is your toolbox, and to know what kind of impact you can expect those tools to have on the businesses that you serve. So that's number 1. Number 2, assess your client's current situation and establish a baseline or a benchmark. So you want to know what your client's current revenue is. You want to know what their current audience size is. You want to know what their conversion rate is. You want to know what their volumes are, both in traffic and in clients. So how many clients, not just the dollar value of the revenue, but how many clients. And from there, that's your starting point. So all of the tactics that you put in place or that you've developed that you're going to put in place from step number 1, you want to be able to track over time, this is the impact that those have had. And that's why you need to start with a baseline. You need to know where you are, and then you need to know where you've gotten to, and then you need to take the delta of those 2 things, and then that's the impact that you have had, or that's the impact that you can communicate to your client that can then translate into value that you've brought to the table. So number 3, and this is related, is ask for data and write it into your agreement. So before you get started, you should have an agreement that says, I'm going to get this data from you. You're going to provide it on this schedule. This is how I'm going to get it. So either I'm going to be an admin on your Facebook page, or you're going to pull the reports and you're going to put them into a Dropbox on this day of the month. Those sorts of things. You want to get financial data, you want to get traffic data, you want to have all the data around the social media metrics, you want to have all the data around their email campaign metrics, so like how many MailChimp subscribers they have, things like that. What are their open rates? All of those things. You want to get as much data that you have, you want that written into your agreement, and you want to know exactly when you're going to get that data and how you're going to get that data, so that you on the back end can do the analysis to determine what effect that you're having on that business, and then also so you can develop a baseline. And you want to be able to track how you're doing over time. That's the overarching goal of this whole video, is you want to be able to know where you started from, how you're progressing over time, and the value that that is delivering to the client. It's the overarching theme. So what can you measure? Audience size. And this list can actually be much longer than it currently is, but you got to start somewhere and you got to cut it off somewhere. The slide's only so big. Facebook page likes, so how many people like this company's your client's Facebook page, plus how many Twitter followers do they have, both potentially personal and also on their business Twitter page. Instagram followers, same thing. Newsletter subscribers, website visitors or blog readers, YouTube subscribers or views, Quora subscribers or views, and then foot traffic. If you've got some sort of a retail establishment, you would hope that you would be able to put some sort of a quantifiable number around the number of people who are just walking into that store, just on a whim. Or potentially, maybe there are clients who go to that retail establishment who don't have any sort of a digital relationship with that business, but or a formal digital relationship. So maybe they follow them on Facebook, but maybe they don't like that page, or maybe they saw an ad, but they didn't necessarily respond to it, things like that. So you want to be able to quantify that as well. So basically what you're doing is you're determining the size of the bucket, the audience bucket that you have to sell to, people who are aware of the business, and you want that bucket to be growing larger over time, and then you want that conversion rate of those potential customers to be growing over time, and then that's going to swell the revenue. I'm going to get to all that in a second, but suffice it to say that you want to be measuring over time the size of the audience for your client, and you want that to be growing over time. And you see this note over here to the right. So in other words, how many people are ingesting your stuff, your content, your ads, all that stuff, your whole digital footprint, as well as your actual physical footprint when we look at foot traffic. Conversion rate. You want to know the conversion rate in total. So here's your audience size. Here are the number of those folks who are customers, and then you also want to know that by channel. So you want to know what if you're going to run ads on Facebook, you want to know what your conversion rate is on Facebook. You want to know what your conversion rate is on Instagram. You want to know what your conversion rate is on YouTube. You want to know what your conversion rate is in newspaper ads that you run. All of those things, if possible. Get as much data as possible so that you can track how that conversion rate is tracking over time. You want that conversion rate to be going higher. So if you can move your audience from 100 to 200, and then if you can move your conversion rate from 50 to 60, you are going to grow that business by quite a bit. So if every customer represents $1 of revenue, if you have an audience size of 100 and your conversion rate is 50, that's $50 in revenue. If you double that audience size to 200 and you also increase the conversion rate to 60, that's now 120 customers. So you've gone from $50 in revenue to $120 in revenue, and that's how you get that exponential growth. Grow the audience size and also grow the conversion rate at the same time. If you can do that for your clients, you need to be measuring that and you need to be communicating that to your clients, and then you need to be, as an agency, getting paid for that value that you have now delivered. And then finally, revenue. Where's the client now? Where were they before? If possible, you want to have some sort of access to a client's revenue numbers over time. You don't necessarily need access to their accounting system, but you want them to be giving you reports on what their revenue is. So in other words, when they engaged you to provide these marketing services, they were making $50 in revenue, and now it's a year later and they're making $120 in revenue, and you can say, well, it's because I did this and this and this, and I grew your audience size by this many, and I increased your conversion rate by this many. Then you need to say, well, I've given you that extra $70 in revenue. You need to pay me this because I am worth this to you, and tell them that there is an ROI because you've demonstrated that ROI. And then finally, be careful of direct response versus branding. These are, as you know, different things. So direct response is where there's an actual action that converts to revenue right then and there. So in other words, you're running a Facebook ad, somebody clicks on the Facebook ad, it takes you to a page where they buy now. you can track that very easily in that direct response marketing type scenario where they clicked on this, it turned into this much revenue, done, easy. Branding is a totally different animal. So running those newspaper ads, getting your name out there, getting the business's name out there, running Facebook ads that basically just take you to a website, or blogging. All of these things, generally speaking, are just branding. They're just getting the name out there. They're getting the content out there. They're telling potential clients what problems they can solve. And so there's no direct response. It doesn't convert into revenue right then and there, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. That's why you want to see the revenue numbers, because maybe you can't track exactly what that direct response was, especially in a foot traffic type scenario, but you can say, I performed all these actions over time, look at how the business grew, and you can say at least some of that or a lot of that is due to the actions that I took for your business. Examples of metrics that you can track for your clients. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but it's an idea. Paid versus organic leads. How many leads are you getting? How many of those did you actually pay for? That gets into that direct response type, or direct response versus branding type discussion. Leads per channel. How many leads did you develop on Facebook? How many leads did you develop on Twitter? How many leads did you develop on Instagram? These different channels. And then that gets into the attribution discussion, which is a topic for another time. Social media followers. How many social media followers do you have on each platform? How is that number growing over time? Email subscribers. How many people subscribe to your email to your client's email on day one? How many are subscribed a year later, 2 years later, so on and so forth? What is the response rate? What is the open rate? That gets into that audience factor as well. Conversion rate, we already talked about that. Website visitors and website bounce rate. So how many more people are coming and visiting that site now as opposed to when you first started your engagement? The bounce rate is essentially how many visitors visit or looked at more than one page on that website versus just one. So the bounce rate is, a bounce is a person comes onto the website and then leaves. They visit one page and then they leave. What you want is for them to stick around a little bit. You want them to visit 2 pages, 3 pages. Keep them in your ecosystem as long as possible so you can get your message across. Profit margins. This could be a function of either pricing or product mix. And as a marketer, you can advise your clients on pricing. So $19.99 sounds better than $24.99, so on and so forth. Or, your client is charging $1 for something that they could be charging $2 for. You know that as a marketer. You are going out and you're getting that data. You're listening to what the market is telling you, and then you are communicating that information back to your client. So you should be able to advise on pricing. Product mix too. If a company sells 3 different widgets, they all have different margins. If you are facilitating traffic to the widget that has the highest margin, overall, that's going to expand the profit margin of your client's business. And that's something that you should also be tracking. That's something you should be paying attention to, and you should be communicating that value to your client as well. Campaign ROI, if you're going to run a series of Facebook ads, you're going to spend $100 on them. You're going to track how much revenue it brings in. If it brings in $400 in revenue, now your ROI is 4 to 1. You need to be charging for that. Revenue per customer, that's basically just speaks to that margin expansion as well, but you want that to be growing over time. So if on day one you're bringing in 1 customer and their revenue is $1, over time you want that 1 customer to now be $2. So for every customer that you bring in, it's $2 of revenue as opposed to the 1. And there's a ton of different tactics that you can use, but that's a metric that you want to be tracking in order to communicate value. Link efficiency, this is calculated by taking the referral source, traffic. So if Quora is sending your website 100 users per month or 100 website visitors per month, and you've got 100 links out on Quora, then your efficiency is 1. You want that number to be going up. So you want more traffic for less links. Obviously, it's just becoming more efficient with the content that you're posting out there. That's something that you can track for your clients. Pages per session, that gets back to the bounce rate, but you want more pages. You want those website visitors to be on the page or on your website ingesting more content than not, obviously. And referral sources. So what's working, what's not? Is the Quora traffic converting? Is the Facebook traffic converting? Is the Twitter traffic converting? If it's not, then why are we focusing on it? And you can be communicating to your clients how you're differentiating the content that you're posting on the different platforms, how that's converting, what platforms are working, and how you're basically moving your efforts between platforms in order to get the most bang for their buck. So, some final thoughts. Have a well-documented and researched list of tactics at your disposal. That is your toolbox, and that will give you an idea of how much value that you can create. What I did not mention earlier is this also speaks to why, as an agency, you should be tracking your time internally, and also you could potentially be taking advantage of the R&D tax credit, which is like money right in your pocket. So 2 things: track your time, potentially take advantage of the R&D tax credit. Have a mechanism internally that you can communicate your value or your potential value to a client, and that you can bill for that. That's what it is. That's your toolbox. Agree to how you're going to receive data from your client up front. Make sure it's enough to be able to communicate your value. So maybe the client pushes back on something that you're asking for. If that something is not going to allow you to effectively communicate your value to that client, you need to revisit whether or not you should be doing work for that client. You want to make sure that you have the ability and the access to the data that will give you the potential to communicate your value effectively to your clients, because that is how you're going to get paid for the value that you are bringing. If you can communicate that value, you can then charge for that value. And then finally, communicate early and often, and then get paid for the value that you're delivering. I just mentioned that, but communication is the key. Having an agreement up front is the key. What you're going to get, how you're going to use it, and how you're going to communicate your value. Resources for this video: there's a blog, How Marketers Can Communicate Value to Their Clients. It expands a little bit on this video and the topics that I covered. Quora, there's a couple of posts out there that I wrote as they pertain to marketing agencies, how you can bill for your value, what you should be thinking about, how you should be communicating your value. And then finally, there's a YouTube video I did a few weeks back, which is about merging accounting and marketing. Accounting is very data analytic focused, or it's becoming more so, but accounting is all about taking financial data and then being able to tell a story about that. Everything that I just covered in the last, 10 minutes or so has been about that. Those things go together very, very well. If you don't have the ability in your agency, the average agency size is between 3 and 10 people. If you don't have an internal accountant or an internal analytics person, think about partnering up with a CPA firm or a financial firm who can help you develop and analyze this data for your clients, so that you can then take that and turn it around into either a marketing report or a dashboard for your clients. And then you, in turn, as a marketing agency owner or somebody who works in an agency, can get paid for the value that you're delivering. The entire focus of this video is getting paid for the value that you're delivering. It's very hard to get paid for the value that you're delivering if you are not quantifying and communicating that value. Otherwise, it's this nebulous thing, and it becomes very difficult for the client to kind of wrap their arms around it if you're not communicating accurately, effectively, and timely, which ironically is what accounting is all about: accurate, effective, timely communication of financial data. So that's it for me. Let's connect. Chris at BetterWayCPA.com. The phone number is 843-608-0298. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Quora, Instagram, and Pinterest. Pretty much everywhere. If you like this video, please like it, share it. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That helps me to build my audience. It also tells me what you like, what you don't like, and what content I should create in the future. But that is it for me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.